This house is mine. I live here with my parents. If you don't like it, then leave. What? The moment my dream home, a newly built single-family house, was completed, Bob said that to me. I unexpectedly shouted in disbelief and froze. However, he didn't seem to be joking. He seemed serious about it. Thinking it was pointless to argue, I whispered in resignation. All right, I'll go. But before you leave, do me a favor. It seemed like Bob had been waiting for me to say that, as he promptly handed me a divorce attorney's business card. Always so careless, yet so well prepared at a time like this. I later reported Bob's actions to my parents. My mother was at a loss for words, and my father was furious. He'll get what's coming to him. It'll be all right. But contrary to my parents' reactions, I couldn't help but smile. My name is Catherine Smith, 28 years old. I now live in an apartment in a small town in Nebraska after leaving my parents' house, and run a nail salon there. I'm also married. I met my husband, Bob, through a friend about 4 years ago. My first impression of Bob was that he seemed very kind. Not exactly a heartthrob, but he didn't gamble, smoke, and only drank moderately. He seemed like the ideal husband. Moreover, like me, he was an only child and appeared to value his family a lot. We connected on that. We believed we could both cherish each other's families. He was different from anyone else I'd ever dated. Yet, I had no reservations about our future and our relationship went smoothly. 2 years into dating, following Bob's proposal, we started living together. The new place was the apartment I had been staying in, which also served as my workplace. Thinking it was more feasible for Bob to move into my place rather than relocating to his parental house, I suggested it. Bob agreed, and our new life began. However, living together, I learned so much about him. Bob was extremely disorganized. He would leave his clothes lying around after taking them off. If they stayed there for 3 days, I'd inevitably feel the urge to do something about it. Aren't you going to wash these? However, whenever I asked, he would respond. I've only worn them like 10 times, they don't need washing. Maybe once or twice is understandable. But clothes left for days and worn 10 times without washing? They're bound to get dirty and probably smell. Even with spare toothbrushes available, he wouldn't change his until I did it for him. He would use the same unwashed towel repeatedly because it was his favorite. I'm not obsessive about cleanliness, but these habits started to get to me. When I brought them up, he'd say, "My mom used to do it. If it bothers you, Catherine, why don't you do it?" Despite my initial patience, I eventually started hand-washing his clothes and buying matching towels to maintain a proper living environment. Yet, his inherent untidiness never changed. Because I work from home, I'd always inform Bob when I had clients. Still, with his hair a mess, Bob would wander into the room I used as a salon, asking, "Catherine, what do we have for lunch?" I felt so embarrassed in front of my clients. Though Bob wanted to avoid working on weekends, some clients can only come on Saturdays and Sundays. No matter how much I appealed to him, he wouldn't change. Bob was both messy and insensitive. I took it upon myself to teach him, step by step, what he shouldn't do. But occasionally, I'd sigh, wondering why I had to go to such lengths for him. Perhaps his family environment played a part. His parents live in a detached house within walking distance from ours. After getting married, we visited his parents' house and sometimes stayed overnight. Spending time with them, I realized that Bob's father had a personality identical to Bob's. Whenever we visited, clothes were strewn around, and his golf gear, a favorite hobby of his, was everywhere. I've nearly tripped over his clubs more than once or twice. And on top of being messy, he was even more insensitive than Bob. Even when he knew I was in the bathroom, he would still enter the changing room. "Hey! Catherine's in the bathroom right now, isn't she?" Even when his wife scolded him, he didn't seem to understand. Why's it an issue? I'm not going into the bathroom. I couldn't help but chuckle at his remarks. Doesn't he consider that there might be underwear lying around or that we could unexpectedly bump into each other? While I wanted to strongly express my discomfort, I couldn't refuse to visit or avoid the in-laws. Many of my friends also had complaints about their husbands or in-laws. While thinking this is just how things are, in the end, all I could do was bear it. Still, I always thought that at least my mother-in-law was a sensible person. She would chide her husband and always cleaned up after him, especially if he left his clothes or trash around. Mom always cleans without a word, she's truly exceptional. However, after Bob made that comment, she began to treat me with resentment. Huh? Doesn't Catherine clean? At Bob's words, my mother-in-law tilted her head in confusion. Pretending to answer her question, Bob began to complain about me. She does it, but she's always nagging. Always telling me to clean up, and complaining about the smallest things. Catherine should just do it herself instead of always telling me to do it. I thought maybe my mother-in-law would say something like, "You should also do what you can." In fact, I had seen her grumbling while cleaning up after my father-in-law, saying, "He's made a mess again." But my intuition was wrong. My mother-in-law glared at me as if I were her enemy. "Catherine, you're always at home, right? You should at least clean up. Why make Bob do it? Who do you think you are?" I was shocked. I had never expected the usually gentle mother-in-law to raise her voice and show such hostility. Even as I was being blamed, Bob just laughed and said, "Yeah, tell her more." Even though they both know I work from home. I'm not just squeezing work into my free time. I work all day, sometimes late into the night for clients. I don't have as much free time as a stay-at-home mother-in-law. But explaining that to my angry mother-in-law now probably wouldn't help. My tactless father-in-law, seeing our argument, just laughed and said, "What did you do, Catherine? You must have really messed up to make her so angry." I felt alone and uncomfortable among my in-laws. After that, I dreaded visiting them. I thought that the busier I got with work, the less I'd have to see them. I took on more and more jobs, asked for referrals to get new clients. And, as a result, I became busier. My income also increased, and I achieved my goal of earning $5,000 a month. Once I reached that goal, I had something I wanted to do. It was to build a house, bring my parents from the countryside, and live together. And to run a nail salon there. Of course, I had discussed this with Bob before we got married. "If things go well with work, I want to build a house, bring my parents from the countryside, and live together. Next to the house, I want to create a small salon and work there." Family is important. I think that's a good idea. I'll support you. His agreement was a significant reason we decided to get married. And the day when that dream would come true arrived. I suggested to Bob that we build our dream home. He agreed, and we soon began checking out model homes and comparing mortgage options. We finally settled on a bank for our mortgage and a construction company. The mortgage was going to be in Bob's name. I had wanted to put it in my name, but being self-employed, I couldn't get the amount we needed on my own. But with Bob being a salaried employee, it wasn't an issue. The repayments wouldn't be too burdensome, especially since my parents planned to help, so it wouldn't be a full loan. We had savings. Of course, I intended to work even harder in my new nail salon, and if I dedicated that to living expenses, we'd have more than enough. We found the land, and construction began. All that remained was to move in once it was done. A few months later, we had a walkthrough of our finished home. I was moved by the scent of the new home and the new construction. The dream nail salon was also completed next to our home with a separate entrance. This way, both family and clients' privacy would be maintained. I would have liked to make it even cuter, but Bob had objected. "We can't spend all our money just on that." While I had other dreams, I had to be realistic. It was a very small salon, but I was satisfied. All that was left was to hand over the house, wait for moving day, and then call my parents. I was excited and looking forward to our new life. But then Bob dropped a bombshell. Nice house. Glad it's done. Good job, Catherine. Good job? We're not done yet. We still have to move and handle other arrangements. Wondering what he was getting at, I laughed it off. But rather than smiling, Bob had a smug look on his face. My smile faded at his expression. Good job indeed. I don't need you anymore. This is my house. I'm gonna live here with my parents. If you don't like it, leave. What? I blurted out in disbelief, frozen in shock. But Bob didn't seem to be joking. He seemed to genuinely mean it. What are you talking about? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. This house is for our family. You don't like my parents, so it's probably better if you're not here, right? Don't joke with me. I've always said my dream was to live with my parents, remember? I shouted at Bob. Yeah. That's why I called them my parents, you know? I was speechless. I never imagined Bob would do something like this. I thought he was a family-oriented person when we married, but I was mistaken. Bob wasn't family-oriented, he was just a child who never grew up and separated from his parents. Our family home is old, right? It needs to be rebuilt soon, and this place was ready just in time. I want to live here with them. It's funny, don't you think, to live with your parents instead of mine? I glared at Bob, who looked smug. And then he said as if it was already decided. My parents already know, and they're coming today to see our new home. So, Catherine, what are you gonna do? Bob grinned, as if he wanted to force me to leave. Then I'll leave. Yeah, that's what I thought. And while you're at it, take care of this too. And as soon as Bob heard my words, he quickly handed me a business card of a divorce lawyer. How could he be so organized only at a time like this? I took them, shaking with anger. My mom told me it'd be better to break up with someone like you, who always nags me. It's a hassle, so don't cry, okay? I held back my tears, not wanting to give him the satisfaction. If I cried now, it would be like admitting defeat. But leaving wasn't defeat. I couldn't bear the thought of living with them. On my way back to my apartment, I called my parents to tell them we wouldn't be moving. Confused by the situation, they immediately came from the countryside. You can't just tell us it's cancelled over the phone. Explain properly. Catherine, what happened? Where's Bob? I realized he hadn't come back. He's probably at his parents', preparing to move in. I was fuming and told my parents everything. My mom was speechless. My dad was livid and wanted to confront Bob and his family, but I stopped him. I'm sure he'll get his comeuppance. So it's fine. Confused by my words, my parents tilted their heads. I was too upset and frustrated to explain when I was kicked out. But Bob forgot something crucial. Surely he would contact me soon, realizing his mistake. With that thought, I continued my usual routine. A week later, as expected, I received a call from Bob. I answered, feeling a bit smug. Hello? Catherine! Something's wrong! The bank keeps calling me. Bob sounded panicked. Listening calmly, I responded. So? I don't have enough money, so I can't transfer it to the contractors. At this rate, I can't even take possession of the house. I've already hired the movers. What am I gonna do? Feeling satisfied that things were going as I'd planned, I laughed at the flustered Bob. He's probably panicking right now, wondering what to do next. I could almost picture the desperation in his tearful voice. So? I'm a stranger now, so it's none of my business. But you said you wanted to build that house. Who was it that kicked me out of that house again? Bob, sounding more pathetic by the second, started mumbling apologies and making excuses. But no apology could make me forgive him. Bob hadn't just taken my home, he'd stolen my dream. You should consult with the bank or the contractors on what to do next. I told him curtly and hung up the phone. He tried calling several times after that, but I was about to see a client. I turned off my phone and got to work. The reason he couldn't take possession of the house was simple: he didn't have enough money in the account. Today, the mortgage was supposed to be executed. Combining that with the balance, the money should have been transferred to the real estate agency. But without the necessary balance, the transfer couldn't have been made. Originally, my parents were gonna gift me $100,000 for the house. Without that entire amount, of course he couldn't make the transfer. Bob probably forgot about my parents' assistance. After seeing my clients, while I was cleaning up, I heard the door to the apartment open. Bob stormed in, his face red with anger. "What's going on? You said everything was taken care of. Explain yourself." I decided to let him in on the situation. And he instantly went pale. "Please, let's pretend the divorce never happened and ask your father for the money." He got down on his knees, begging. "Who's the one that kicked me out of that house? Why would I help you now?" "But that house has your salon in it. Didn't you always dream of that?" "I don't need such a tiny shack anymore." My words left Bob in despair. And there he was, apologizing over and over, tears and snot streaming down his face. But looking at Bob in that state, I felt no sympathy whatsoever. Maybe my love for him had already vanished the day he turned his back on me. "Don't cry, will you? It's annoying." I threw his words back at him. "And if you're gonna plead with someone, why not your parents? They're so fond of their little Bob, after all," I said with a smirk, and then kicked him out. In the end, Bob ended up using all his parents' savings, sold off his father's prized golf clubs, and even canceled their insurance to make up the $100,000. Because of the insurance cancellation fees and such, the move couldn't be completed on the scheduled day, so the movers had to be canceled. Of course, this meant incurring cancellation fees. I had no choice but to pay those fees and reschedule. The family home was supposed to be sold, but it was too old and no buyers were interested. Someone showed up offering to buy the property if we'd tear down the house, but we couldn't afford the demolition costs. So, we had no choice but to leave the demolition to the buyer and sold the property for a pittance. Bob and his family might have run out of money, but they managed to move into the new house. But from now on, nearly all of Bob's salary will go towards the mortgage. I'm a little curious about how they're going to manage their finances. 6 months later, I had plans to meet up with some friends. Since some of them have kids, we decided to have lunch together. I was looking forward to this day and didn't take any appointments for the lunchtime. The friend who introduced me to Bob was there, and since everyone knew about our divorce, Bob wasn't present. However, Bob was the hot topic of conversation. Speaking of which, I heard Bob's mom is hospitalized due to an injury. Really? Yeah. She slipped on clothes Bob left lying around and fell awkwardly, fracturing her pelvis. I couldn't help but smirk, thinking about their new house getting messy because Bob can't clean up after himself. One friend, curious about another's source of information, asked, "How did you find out?" "He contacted me a few days ago asking to borrow money. They don't have insurance, and they need money for medical and living expenses." Considering everything with Catherine and expecting he'd ask again, I've decided to cut ties and deleted his contact. Praising the friend's wise decision, I added, "That's the right call. Nothing good comes from associating with him." And we all laughed. After taking a short break and returning home, I noticed a new booking. I had some time before my next appointment, so I responded immediately. I need to make as much as I can now. But to my surprise, the person who showed up was Bob. "What are you doing here?" "What do you mean? I made an appointment. I want you to do my nails." He grinned sheepishly. I stopped him from entering without hesitation. Bob had always dismissed the idea of men getting manicures as too bothersome or unmanly. But nowadays, even men get manicures. He used to mock it, so what changed his mind? Really? Aren't you here to borrow money? When I said that, Bob's eyes widened. It seems I hit the nail on the head. If you know, then it makes things easier. Please, I don't need the manicure. I don't even need to come inside, just lend me $1,000. I sighed deeply. Bob continued with his sob story, trying desperately to evoke sympathy. I never really wanted to break up. Ever since you left, it's been one disaster after another. I've come to realize just how important you were to me. It's not too late. Can't we get back together? I'm sure both of my parents would welcome you back with open arms. The look on his face as he said that, with tearful eyes shining, was like something out of a soap opera. I sighed heavily at the sight of him. To begin with, I have no intention of getting back with you, and I wouldn't want to live with those people no matter what. If you want to change your life, you need to start by cleaning up your messy lifestyle. It's because of your carelessness, leaving clothes all over the place, that your mother got hurt. How did you? By the way, it's about time. Today's appointment fee is $30. Once you pay that, please leave, I said, glancing at the clock. Bob was dumbfounded. You didn't even let me in the house. We just talked at the door, and I didn't get anything done. Why do I have to pay? His face turned red, yelling at me. You made a salon appointment for the $30 manicure service. You decided not to get it because you wanted to talk, right? I shot back at him. Bob was speechless. I told him, if you can't pay, promise you'll never contact me again. Bob clenched his fists. Just then, Catherine? Is there a problem? Emerging from the living room was my boyfriend, Jason, who was introduced to me by a regular client's son after learning about my divorce. Yes, but he's leaving now, I informed Jason, to which Bob yelled at him as well. Who are you? It's none of your business. Clearly, something clicked for Jason. I'm her fiancé. Was there some kind of misunderstanding? Fiancé? Yes, nice to meet you. Bob seemed taken aback by Jason's cheerful demeanor. And then, the two of them quietly left, with Jason gently nudging Bob on the back. Once they reached the outer hallway, Jason turned to me and asked, Did you tell him about your salon's relocation? Actually, she's moving her nail salon. See that big house being built over there? That's our new home. We're opening the salon there. What? Bob was silent, just staring at the massive house under construction. Probably twice the size of the one he built. Beside it was a cute, log cabin-style nail salon. We hope to see you again, Jason said with a smile, and it seemed Bob finally realized he'd lost. He slinked away. And I couldn't help but find it amusing. Sorry for intruding like that. I overheard everything and didn't want to intervene, thinking you might get upset. Don't apologize. Your timing was perfect. That's a relief. I watched Bob hurry away and shared a laugh with Jason. Then the two of us headed back into the apartment building. In the end, Bob never managed to gather enough money, and it seems he's now taken up a nighttime construction job after his day job. But, if I recall, Bob's company had a strict no-side job policy. Regardless, I can't help but shake my head at Bob's reckless choices. He could have revised his mortgage repayments or considered other alternatives. But he never did anything before, so maybe he never thought of it. It's probably only a matter of time before his workplace finds out about his second job. I heard that his father-in-law has been working at a supermarket. A friend saw him and let me know. Bob always seems to rely on his parents. But it's also the parents who raised such a child. Life's tough, but I hope they do their best. Bob's mother has been having difficulties moving due to numbness from the after effects of a pelvic fracture. I do feel a bit sorry for her, given she's always taken on all the household chores by herself. Because of her limited mobility, there's a rumor that their new home is starting to look a bit like a hoarder's place. The small shed that was supposed to be my nail salon is already filled with junk. It seems items are even overflowing from there. It appears they had to keep all the junk from demolishing their old home, but maybe they didn't have the money to dispose of it. It doesn't seem like a bright future awaits careless Bob and his family. After all that, I ended up marrying Jason. We built our new home, where my parents also live with us. And I finally relocated and opened the nail salon I'd always dreamed of. The former customer, now my mother-in-law, who lives nearby, has been introducing friends, so business is going well. Furthermore, Jason's younger sister told me she looks up to me and wants to be a nail technician. Surrounded by a lovely family and having achieved my dream, I feel so blessed. I'm determined to keep striving for happiness in the future.